Welcome you. Let's face it, trying to stay on top of a field as dynamic as digital health, well, it can feel like a lot, can't it?
Oh, absolutely. Especially when you mix it with something as complex and regulated as drug development.
Right, information overload is real. You're getting stuff from everywhere.
Exactly. So that's why we're here doing this deep dive. Think of it as your curated guide. We've waded through transcripts, regulatory docs like the CFR.
That's the FDA's rule book, pretty much.
Yeah, essentially.
Yeah.
And we've even pulled insights from scientific papers to, get you the crucial info you need right now, specifically on how regulators are looking at these digital health tools and all the data they generate in drug development.
Perfect. So our mission today really is to cut through that noise. We
Yeah.
want to make it clear how the regulators are thinking about digital health when it comes to getting new medicines out there.
Because it's changing, isn't it? The guidelines are evolving.
Constantly. And companies are, well, they're facing real challenges trying to keep up and comply. So, yeah, we're extracting the key bits and trying to connect the dots for you. Okay, let's get into it.
So what's interesting, right off the bat, our sources don't just hand us a neat little definition like digital health in drug development is X,
Okay.
but you really see what it means by how it's used. We're talking about using digital tools and the data from those tools all the way through the process of making a new drug.
From the very beginning, like lab work.
Yeah, from early experiments right through clinical trials and even monitoring after a drug is approved.
Okay, that makes sense. And when we talk regulation here, the FDA looms large, doesn't it? It comes up in the CFR, Title 21, and even in that AI patent stuff we looked at.
Oh, definitely. They're the main player setting the rules of the road in the U.S. for sure.
So how are they approaching it? Is it like one size fits all?
Not exactly. Their existing system for medical devices gives us a clue.
Uh-huh.
Many digital health tools kind of fall under that umbrella. And there's a key difference. You've got pre-market approval, or PMA. That's the really intensive review, usually for higher risk things. Think maybe complex AI algorithms making diagnostic calls.
Right, things where if it goes wrong, it could be serious.
Precisely. Then there's the 510K pathway. That's a bit more streamlined. It's for devices that are substantially equivalent, basically, similar enough to something already legally on the market, a predicate device.
Ah, so if it's like an updated version of something already approved, it might go through that faster track.
Kind of, yeah. But the level of scrutiny, it really tracks with the potential risks. Like you said, higher risk, deeper dive.
Makes sense.
And no matter which path, a core requirement is validation. The FDA needs solid scientific evidence. Companies have to prove their tool works like it's supposed to, and the data is actually reliable.
You can't just say, trust us, this app works.
No, definitely not. Needs proof, real evidence.
Okay, so that's the general device regulation picture, but we're focused on how these tools fit into drug development itself. Integrating them into that whole pipeline from lab bench to bedside.
Right, and that is where it gets really interesting. Let's think about the stages. Preclinical. Well, our sources don't give tons of specific examples there, but you can imagine maybe digital tools helping understand disease models better, or perhaps assessing early drug effects in new ways.
Like using AI to analyze complex biological data sets, maybe, or super high-res imaging in the lab.
Yeah, things like that. Plausible scenarios. But where we're seeing the most impact right now, based on what we've reviewed, is definitely clinical trials.
Okay, how so?
Well, think about wearables, sensors people wear.
Like fitness trackers, but maybe more medical grade.
Exactly. These things can collect data constantly. Heart rate, activity, sleep, maybe even things like blood oxygen or glucose levels, depending on the device.
So instead of just getting a blood pressure reading once a month in the clinic,
Yeah.
you could have data streaming in, like, all the time from the patient's actual life.
Precisely. It's a huge jump in the sheer amount of data. And also the kind of data. It's real-world data, not just a snapshot in an artificial clinic setting.
Wow, okay. That must give researchers a much richer understanding of how a drug is working or not working.
Potentially, yes.
Yeah.
You could spot subtle changes, trends over time, things you might miss with just occasional check-ins. Now, the sources didn't explicitly say this data is like changing trial designs on the fly yet.
But the potential is there.
Absolutely. The richness of the data opens up a lot of possibilities down the road.
But hang on, if you're collecting all this personal health data digitally, privacy and security must be massive concerns.
Huge, yeah. It wasn't the main focus of the sources we dove into for this specific topic, but it's impossible to ignore. Regulators are definitely focused on that.
You'd have to be. Protecting patient data is paramount.
It's table stakes. Any tool used in drug development has to meet really high standards for privacy and security. It's a major part of the whole compliance picture companies have to deal with.
So speaking of compliance, what are the big headaches for companies trying to use these digital tools in their R&D?
Well, one big one is just the rules are still evolving. It's a moving target.
Hmm.
That creates uncertainty, which isn't great when you're planning multi-year, multi-million-dollar drug programs.
Yeah, you need some predictability.
Right. And then there's the documentation and validation burden. You really have to prove your digital tool is up to snuff.
That sounds incredibly important. If you're making decisions about a drug based on data from an app or a sensor, you have to know that data is accurate.
Exactly. It reminds me, actually, of the rigor we see in, like, good manufacturing practices, GMP, that came up in our quality control sources, and the CFR Part 211 stuff.
Ah, okay. So like the strict controls they have for making the actual drug substance.
Yeah. That same level of meticulous record-keeping, process validation, proving everything works consistently, you need that for the digital tools, too.
That's a great parallel. Makes total sense.
And another thing, potentially, is interoperability. Can data from different systems, different devices, actually talk to each other? Can it be pooled and analyzed easily?
Yeah. If every tool uses a different format, it becomes a nightmare to integrate, both for the company and for the FDA reviewers, I imagine.
Exactly. Standardization or lack thereof can be a real challenge.
Now, you mentioned drawing parallels. Our outline points to the OPR&D sources. Those are usually deep in the weeds of chemistry, right? Making molecules.
Very much so, yeah. Process optimization, synthesis routes.
So how does that connect to digital health regulation? Seems like different worlds.
Conceptually, though, there's a strong link. Think about the incredible detail and control they describe in OPR&D for making a drug. Every temperature, every pressure, every reagent addition is documented and controlled.
Right, to ensure quality and consistency.
Precisely. That same mindset, that same level of uh, rigor and validation is what's needed for the digital components.
So, okay, let's say you're using a smartphone app for patients to report their symptoms in a trial. You'd need the same kind of detailed validation for that app, how it collects the data, how it processes it, how secure it is, as you would for, say, a crucial purification step in mating the drug molecule.
That's the idea. Think about how they obsess over impurities in the quality control docs we looked at. They use sophisticated analytical methods to find and quantify tiny amounts of unwanted stuff.
Yeah.
The data from a digital health tool needs that same level of scrutiny regarding its reliability and validity. If the digital data is questionable, if you can't trust it, it could seriously compromise the study's findings, just like a contaminated drug batch would.
Okay, wow, that really clicks. It's all about the trustworthiness of the information, no matter if it comes from a chemical test or a smartwatch sensor.
You got it. It's all evidence supporting the drug's safety and efficacy.
And thinking about evidence, how might this digital health data impact things like accelerated approval pathways?
Yeah, that's a really interesting area. So accelerated approval, as we know, lets drugs for serious conditions get to patients faster, often based on surrogate endpoints.
Right, things that are likely to predict a real clinical benefit, but aren't the final benefit itself, like shrinking a tumor or lowering viral load, like we saw in the phase 3 transcript examples.
Exactly. So the question becomes, could data from digital health tools serve as reliable surrogate endpoints in the future?
Hmm.
Imagine, say, for a condition like Parkinson's. Maybe continuous monitoring of movement patterns via a wearable sensor could give a much more sensitive measure of disease progression or how well a drug is working.
Than just having a doctor assess them in the clinic every few months.
Potentially, yes. It could offer a more objective, continuous, real-world picture.
That sounds promising, but I bet the bar would be incredibly high for regulators to accept that.
Oh, absolutely. Extremely high. You'd need rock-solid proof that the digital tool is reliable, that the data is valid, and crucially, that the changes measured by the tool strongly correlate with how patients are actually feeling, functioning, or surviving.
So the link between the digital measure and the real clinical benefit has to be ironclad.
Ironclad is a good word for it. You need robust evidence. It can't just be a cool gadget. It has to provide clinically meaningful information that regulators can trust.
So digital health could maybe speed things up in some cases, but only if the science behind the digital endpoint is really, really strong.
Exactly. The potential is there, but the regulatory framework is still adapting, and companies have a lot of work to do to generate that convincing evidence.
Okay, So, pulling this all together, what's the main takeaway for our listeners from this deep dive on regulating digital health in drug development?
I think the core message is regulators are definitely paying attention. They're actively working on how to handle digital health tools and data in this space. But it's still very much a work in progress. The tech is moving fast, and the guidelines are trying to keep pace.
So, companies need to be proactive.
Absolutely. Proactive, stay informed about the changes, and really focus on ensuring their digital tools and the data that comes from them meet those high standards for reliability, validity, and ultimately patient safety. That's number one.
And hopefully, diving into these different sources, the regulations, the literature, the transcripts, has given everyone a good foundational picture of how these pieces fit together like we aim to do.
Which leaves us with a thought to ponder, doesn't it, for you, the listener? As these digital technologies keep racing ahead, how do you think the regulatory frameworks might need to change even more? How do we balance encouraging innovation with making absolutely sure patients are safe?
Yeah, and what role do you actually see these digital tools playing 5, 10 years down the line in clinical trials, in getting drugs approved?
Some big questions there. Definitely things worth thinking about.
Absolutely. We really encourage you to keep exploring this area. It's changing so fast. And hey, if this dive sparked any ideas or questions for you, we're always interested. It's all part of figuring this out together.